It happened on a rainy Thursday night, the kind of night when the city looked expensive even to people who had nothing. I was standing in the marble lobby of the Crown Meridian Hotel in downtown Chicago, soaked through a thrift store coat, holding a brown envelope under my arm like it was worth more than my life. To the young man behind the front desk, I probably looked like a mistake that had wandered in from the street. He glanced at my shoes, then my jacket, then the envelope in my hand. "Sir," he said with a tight smile, "this hotel is for registered guests." "I know," I told him. "That's why I'm here." He gave me the kind of look people save for men they think are lying. "Do you have a reservation?" "No." "Then I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I didn't move. "I need to speak to the manager." That was when the man beside him, a tall, polished-looking guy in a navy suit, stepped in. His name tag said Dunlap, General Manager. He looked at me like I was a stain on his floor. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice like he was being patient with a child. "We get all kinds in here. If you need a meal, there's a shelter 2 blocks east." A few people in the lobby turned to look. A woman near the fireplace pulled her purse closer. A bellhop stared at the marble under his feet like he suddenly found it fascinating. I felt my face burn. Not from shame exactly, but from something colder, something older. "I didn't come for a meal," I said. Dunlap sighed. "Then what?" I held up the brown envelope. "I came to reclaim what was stolen from me." He almost laughed. The front desk clerk did laugh. Dunlap folded his arms. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one last time to leave before I call security." I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Go ahead. Call them. But when they get here, tell them to bring the board minutes, the old partnership agreement, and my son's name." That got their attention, because my son's name was on the door. Not literally. It was on the hotel's corporate records. The son who had not spoken to me in 11 years. The son who had taken my family's money, my trust, and maybe the only chance I ever had at peace. And now, he was the man who ran this place. My name is Walter Hale. And before that night, almost nobody at the Crown Meridian knew who I was. That was the point. I had spent the last 6 years living quiet, cheap, and invisible, after a life built on glass towers, private clubs, and boardrooms where men smiled while trying to cut your throat with a handshake. I had a wife once, Eleanor, the kind of woman who could silence a room just by walking into it. I had a son, Gavin, who was smart, charming, and so hungry for approval that it eventually ate him alive. And I had a daughter, Claire, who was the only one in the family who ever told me the truth, even when it made her cry. Years ago, I built the Meridian name from a single tired motel on the edge of Milwaukee. I worked my way up from washing dishes, then managing front desks, then owning a piece of everything that had once been used against me. I used to believe hard work meant something sacred. Then I learned that money doesn't just change people, it reveals them. Eleanor died when Claire was 23. After the funeral, Gavin became the man he thought he was always meant to be. Confident, cruel, untouchable. He took over more and more of the business. He said I was old-fashioned, said I didn't understand modern hospitality, said the chain needed fresh blood. What he really meant was that he wanted me out before I found out what he'd been doing. I discovered it by accident. A clerk in our legal department, a nervous woman named Marta, slipped me copies of financial transfers, shell companies, and an unapproved restructuring plan. Gavin had been moving assets, selling off family-owned properties through a private entity in the name of his wife's brother. On paper, it was all neat. In reality, it was theft dressed in a suit. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just stared at me from across my own office and said, "You built everything with control, Dad. I'm just using the system the way it's meant to be used." I remember asking him, "Since when does my son talk like a criminal?" And he smiled. I'll never forget that smile. Since I learned that sentiment doesn't pay dividends. A week later, he had me removed from the board for health reasons. He used concern as a weapon. My lawyer warned me I'd lose a long battle if I fought right away. Claire begged me to let her help, but I made a mistake a lot of fathers make. I thought my son would come back to me if I gave him time. I thought blood meant something stronger than greed. It didn't. Gavin and his wife Tessa convinced everyone I was becoming confused. They told employees I was stepping back. They moved me from the penthouse office to a small condo for my comfort. Then came the final insult. They cut off my company card and locked my access to the family trust. That was 6 years ago. I disappeared on purpose after that. Not because I was beaten, but because I was gathering my breath. Claire was the only one who stayed close. She called every Sunday, brought groceries, sat with me when the silence got too heavy. She said one thing over and over. Dad, one day they'll learn what you really gave them. Then, 3 months ago, Claire died in a car crash on a wet highway outside Columbus. Just like that, the only person who still loved me without conditions was gone. At the funeral, Gavin didn't cry. He looked tired, impatient, and more annoyed by the weather than by his sister's coffin. Tessa wore black like she was attending a gala. When I tried to speak to Gavin afterward, he said, "Don't make a scene, Dad. People are watching." People were always watching. But nobody had been watching the right thing. In Claire's belongings, I found an envelope she had marked in her handwriting, "For Dad only if I don't make it to the meeting." Inside was a flash drive, a notarized copy of an old deed, and a letter she'd written 2 weeks before she died. She explained that she had quietly investigated Gavin for over a year. He had not only been moving money, he had been preparing to sell the entire Crown Meridian chain to a luxury conglomerate in secret, using a shell acquisition company. He planned to announce my incapacity after the sale and push me out with nothing but a memorial plaque and a thank you speech. But Claire had found something else. My late wife's family had held a hidden, controlling interest in one piece of the original business portfolio, and that interest had never been properly transferred after Eleanor's death. The legal structure was messy, old, and buried under decades of mergers. Gavin didn't know Claire had uncovered the final document. If I could prove who the original owner truly was, the entire sale could be frozen. And the final document was in the Crown Meridian's executive archives. So I came back, not as the owner, not yet, as a poor old man in a thrift store coat, carrying 6 years of rage in a brown envelope. Security arrived in under a minute. 2 men. One of them was younger and looked embarrassed. The other looked eager to show off. "Sir," the older one said, "you need to come with us." I nodded toward Dunlap. "Tell him I asked for the board minutes," Dunlap sneered. "You can ask for the moon too. Doesn't mean you get it." Then someone behind me said, "Actually, he does." The voice was calm, controlled, familiar. I turned. It was Marcus Bell, the hotel's lead attorney, a man I had hired 15 years ago when he was fresh out of law school and too honest for his own good. He had aged well, with silver at his temples, and a face that still looked like it belonged to someone who disliked nonsense. He looked at Dunlap, then at me, and his expression changed into something unreadable. "Mr. Hale," he said quietly. Dunlap blinked. "You know him?" Marcus didn't take his eyes off me. "Yes." The lobby went still. Dunlap's face tightened. "How?" Marcus reached into his briefcase and took out a folder. "Because the last time I saw him, he owned a controlling interest in this hotel, and several others under the Meridian umbrella. I also have a document here that says he never legally relinquished it." The room seemed to shrink. Dunlap's smile vanished. "That's impossible." Marcus opened the folder. Not impossible, just hidden. At that exact moment, a voice cut through the tension from the mezzanine above. "Well, this is embarrassing." I looked up. Gavin stood there in a tailored coat, one hand resting on the railing, his face pale with anger and disbelief. Tessa stood beside him, lips parted, as if she'd just swallowed ice. Gavin looked down at me like I was a ghost that had learned to walk. "You," he said. "Yes," I said. He came down the stairs slowly, each step full of the kind of confidence people fake when the ground is moving under them. "You're supposed to be in your condo." "I was," I said, "until I got invited to my own hotel." The word hotel landed like a slap. Dunlap looked from Gavin to me. suddenly unsure which man to fear. Gavin's jaw tightened. "What is this?" Marcus answered before I could. "This is a legal interruption of the pending sale. Also, Mr. Hale's ownership rights are under review, and given the documentation his daughter provided, several of your recent transfers may be grounds for civil and criminal investigation." Tessa stepped forward, sharp as broken glass. "That's absurd. Walter signed those rights away." I smiled, though there was no joy in it. "Did I?" She hesitated just long enough for me to know. Marcus lifted the second document from the folder. "Mr. Hale never signed the final transfer. His signature page was replaced. There are witness inconsistencies, altered dates, and a false corporate seal." Gavin stared at the papers, then at me. "You've been planning this." "No," I said. "I've been mourning my daughter." That hit him harder than anything else so far. For 1 second, I saw something flicker in his face. Not guilt, not yet. Just the faintest crack in the armor. But then he sealed it over again. "You're trying to ruin me," he said. I took a step toward him. "You ruined yourself the day you decided your father was worth less than a signature." A few guests were now watching openly. Phones came out. A woman near the bar whispered to her husband. One of the bellhops disappeared toward the back office, probably to fetch more people. Dunlap suddenly looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Gavin turned to Marcus. "This can be negotiated," Marcus said. "Not if you altered estate records." "Allegedly," Tessa snapped. I looked at her and saw the same hunger Claire had once warned me about. Tessa had married Gavin for the lifestyle and married the lifestyle for the leverage. She hated being poor more than she loved being honest. My old heart was tired, but it was not soft. "Where's Claire's flash drive?" Tessa said nothing. I repeated it louder this time. "Where is my daughter's flash drive?" Gavin's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Marcus answered. "The one containing emails, transfer records, and the signed statement from your deceased daughter. She sent copies to 3 people, including me, before she died." Gavin went white. That was the moment I knew Claire had gotten him. Not with revenge, with truth. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. "Even if that's real, it doesn't change the fact that this hotel is mine now." The board approved it. Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. One signature was missing. Yours. That. Dunlap looked at Gavin with fresh panic. "You told me it was finalized." Gavin rounded on him. "It was supposed to be." The whole room seemed to inhale. I had seen strong men collapse over less. Greed has a way of turning every alliance into a temporary one. Then, from the service corridor, a young woman in a housekeeping uniform approached hesitantly. I recognized her from the mornings I had spent in this hotel years earlier, back when I was still allowed to walk through it like a king instead of a problem. She stopped beside me and whispered, "Mr. Hale?" I looked at her. "My name is Elena," she said. "Your daughter helped me. I work in accounting now because of her. She told me to come if anything happened tonight." She handed Marcus a slim USB drive. I could hardly breathe. Marcus looked at it, then at her. "What is this?" Elena said. "The backup Claire made. She told me to give it to her father if Gavin tried to move the archives." Gavin's face twisted. "You stole company property!" Elena lifted her chin. "No, I copied evidence of your theft." For the first time, the arrogant man in the Navy suit had no answer. Marcus plugged the drive into a laptop he had somehow produced from his case like a magician pulling out a knife. As the files opened, the lobby grew silent, except for the rain against the windows and the soft tapping of keys. One by one, names appeared. Shell companies, offshore accounts, internal emails, an unsigned memo from Gavin ordering staff to delay maintenance at one of our older properties because deferred safety expenses increase sale value. There it was, in black and white. Profit over people. I closed my eyes, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. When I opened them again, Gavin was staring at the screen as if it had betrayed him. Marcus stood up. "The sale is frozen. The attorneys for the buyer have been notified. And since several records were tampered with, The authorities will want to speak to you." Gavin laughed once, sharply. "Authorities? Over family business?" "No," I said. "Over theft." He stepped toward me, anger flashing through him in a way that made him look younger and uglier at the same time. "You think this makes you noble? You vanished. You let me do everything." I didn't flinch. "I let you show me who you were." His voice cracked then, just a little. "I was trying to save the company." "No," I said. "You were trying to save your reflection." For the first time, Tessa looked afraid. Real afraid. Not for Gavin. For herself. And then she did what people like her always do when the walls close in. She sold him out. "Walter," she said quickly. "I tried to stop him. I did. Gavin handled the transfers. He made the calls. He said you were confused and that no one would question it because you had stepped away." Gavin stared at her like he wanted to throw her into the fireplace. "Shut up," he hissed. She backed away. "No, you shut up. I'm not going down for your mess." Dunlap looked sick. He took off his glasses and wiped them, trying not to look at anyone. "I was following instructions from corporate." Marcus snapped the folder closed. "You were following illegal instructions." Then there was a new sound. Not the rain, not the keys. Sirens. I looked toward the glass doors as red and blue lights washed over the wet street outside. 2 police officers entered with a woman from the district attorney's office. The room was full now, staff, guests, security, all frozen inside one terrible moment of exposure. Gavin's posture collapsed. For years, I had imagined revenge as something explosive, loud, satisfying. But standing there in the hotel lobby while my son realized he had lost everything, I felt something else. Not joy, not hatred, just a heavy kind of peace. The officer asked for Gavin's hands. Tessa started crying, but only after she understood crying might help her. Dunlap began stammering explanations that nobody believed. Several staff members who had been afraid of Gavin for years suddenly found their voices and described exactly how they had been pressured, lied to, and pushed around. And me? I just stood there in my old coat while the Crown Meridian's polished world came apart around me. Before Gavin was let out, he stopped and looked back at me. His face was stripped of everything fake now. He looked like a boy who had never learned the cost of his own hunger. "I'm your son," he said. And there it was at last. The one thing he had always known how to use. I felt the old wound open, but this time it did not control me. "Yes," I said. "And that's the saddest part." He stared at me for a second longer, then turned away. The weeks that followed were brutal. The investigation spread across the Meridian chain. Hidden accounts were exposed. Assets were recovered. Several executives were removed. Dunlap lost his job, and later, his license. Tessa filed for separation before the indictments could reach her. She tried to claim she had been misled, but the records told a different story. Gavin was charged with fraud, conspiracy, and falsifying corporate documents. The court hearings were messy, public, and humiliating. He went from being the man who walked through hotel lobbies like he owned the sky to a defendant in a cheap suit under fluorescent lights. I did not visit him. People asked me why. They thought I should. They said family is family. Maybe if Claire had lived, I would have considered it. She always believed people could be brought back from the edge if you gave them enough honesty and enough time. But she was gone, and Gavin had spent too many years choosing power over love. I used Claire's flash drive to create a foundation in her name. It now funds hotel worker scholarships, legal aid, and emergency housing for employees in crisis. Elena was promoted and now runs internal compliance for the Midwest properties. Marcus became the new chair of our legal trust. And the Crown Meridian, after months of shame, was slowly rebuilt around people who remembered that hospitality is supposed to mean dignity, not domination. As for me, I did something I should have done long ago. I returned ownership to a trust with strict protections, one that no single family member could ever hijack again. I kept enough to ensure the company survived. I kept enough to honor Eleanor's years and Claire's last act of courage. But I refused to let my name be used as a crown for anyone else's greed. On the day the new trust was signed, I stood in the same lobby where I had been insulted in my old coat. This time, the staff knew who I was. But that was not why they were kind. They were kind because I was kind back. One of the new bellhops, a nervous kid maybe 19 years old, asked if I needed help with my bag. I told him no, but thank you. He smiled like he'd been given something valuable. And that was when I understood the real inheritance Claire had left me. Not the hotels, not the money. The chance to prove that power means nothing if it does not protect the people beneath it. Sometimes I still think about Gavin. Not often, and not with anger. More like one thinks about a storm that destroyed a field, but could never touch the roots underground. He made his choices. He got his consequences. That is justice, even when it comes late. And every once in a while, when I walk through the Crown Meridian at night and hear the soft hum of the elevators, I remember that first moment in the lobby, when a man in a fine suit looked at my worn coat and decided I was nothing. He was wrong. And in the end, that was the only mistake he needed to make.